Folks, welcome to Repetitious Questions. This material is a combination of the expertise that has been gathered over the years and some very particular information from a gentleman named Dr. Cameron Camp. Dr. Cameron Camp is well known for his work with Montessori and dementia, amongst other things. Before we get started, I'm going to explain our privacy policy to you. So we are excited to be able to connect with our clients during these times of self-isolation and social distancing. We know staying connected is so important. Please note that we are using Zoom, an online technology that helps us connect with you securely. We believe that privacy measures put in place by Zoom will protect your privacy, but urge you to also take steps to protect your privacy, such as using secure Wi-Fi, and being aware of your surroundings. Also, since we are working from home, please be assured that we have taken measures to ensure your privacy is respected from others who are socially distancing with us. So now it's into the meat of the matter. Did you know, and you may or may not know this, but we have some new folks on the line, so I'm going to try to do a little catch up. Dementia and Alzheimer's disease are caused by degenerative diseases of the brain. If there is an organic breakdown of brain cells, then you end up with what is called dementia. So dementia is always driven by an underlying disease process. And there are many, many different diseases that can cause you to exhibit dementia. When we're talking about dementia, we're talking about changes in abilities. And I'm going to have a few slides on those for you. Dementia is something that occurs slowly. It can last anywhere from 2 to 20 years. If you are okay Friday and not okay on Saturday, you might have a problem, but you're probably not talking dementia. If it's something sudden like that, it's not a dementia. The dementias are slow and spread out in their progression. The good news is that having dementia or disease of the brain is not a normal part of aging. So that's a thumbs up piece of information. Unfortunately, we have no clear treatment or cure for any of the irreversible dementia so far. If somebody is told that they have some form of dementia, this is what you might be familiar with. In the early stage, these are very common symptoms. Memory loss for recent events, in other words, short-term memory loss, language problems, word finding difficulties, challenges with numbers, being able to manipulate and understand numbers, mood swings, suddenly in tears or suddenly angry, seems to come out of nowhere, depression, insomnia. And people may be aware in the early stage, some people are aware of the changes within themselves. And so they're very embarrassed or frustrated or angry or sad. And they often withdraw socially. They try to not make mistakes, so they pull back. Mid-stage, you tend to see more of the first symptoms. They become a little more common, a little more intense, more pronounced. They don't live in the past. I put this up here because people say, oh, they're living in the past. And this is something I really want to clarify. People live now in 2021, but they may only have access to information from further back in their memory bank. So they probably don't have access to current information on a regular basis. So they're trying to function in the here and now with old, out-of-date data. You might start to see some unusual eating habits, really focusing on sweets often. They might become very restless. It's hard for people to maintain focus and concentration. Definitely feelings of frustration and maybe suspiciousness start to show in the mid-stage. This is hyper or hypoactivity. People either get busy and stay busy and do stuff and never stop, or you can get people that literally do nothing. They don't engage, they don't involve themselves. So it can go either way. Sometimes people feel panicky. Unfortunately, some people experience hallucinations or delusions. They might feel that people are out to get them in some way. There's an element of paranoia. and you'll really notice a decline in self-care abilities. Those are the ADLs, activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, feeding, eating, those sorts of things, grooming. In the late stage, our learned abilities and our memories are quite eroded. And sometimes it doesn't look like they recognize family members. There's quite severe language disorientation, so it can be challenging to communicate. Sometimes people become mute, so it's impossible to have a two-way conversation. Often the bodily control, they might not move easily, they might lose control of bowel and bladder, and you do see a continual decline in their strength and their abilities. So those are the things that are happening, and what does that mean for us? It means we have to get to know the person all over again. They're still the person they were. They are always a person. They are a person living with a dementia. But we need to reassess. And these are the questions that we really need to ask ourselves in order to be successful in supporting somebody living with a dementia. What can they handle? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are their likes and their dislikes? You'll notice that slide asks questions that look at the positives and look at the areas where folks might be struggling a bit. It is really important to have a well-balanced picture, because people until the very late stages don't lose all their abilities. So how can we find some of the positives? So when we're looking at these situations and we're asking ourselves these questions and we're thinking about different behaviors, particularly today, we're going to focus on repetitious questions or repetitious storytelling. We need to ask ourselves, why is this happening? And we can't just say it's happening because they have dementia, because if we explain everything they do by saying they have dementia, oh, they do that because they have dementia, we just get in a big circle. We just circle around and around, and it doesn't help us problem solve at all. So the person with dementia is still a person, as I was saying. We want to see past the disease. We want to see the person. So the question really is, what would cause a person to do this? Why? Why is somebody doing what they're doing? So when it comes to repetitive questions, there are really two reasons that people tend to get into this. And we're going to look at reason one first. It's because the person is seeking information. Legitimately, they want an answer to their question, often because they have trouble storing new information. So if they say, when's my dentist appointment? And you say Wednesday, and they ask you in an hour, when's my dentist appointment? And you say Wednesday, it's a circle game, and nobody's winning it. People are unable to retain new information internally. They can't keep it in their head. What they see and what they hear, if the hippocampus is damaged, won't go into the cortex to go to long-term storage. So we need to help them by storing information externally and hopefully teach them how to find that information for themselves. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Not necessarily simple, but certainly worth a try and a good place to start. So I want to talk about something called spaced retrieval. Has anybody heard of spaced retrieval? Anybody at all? No, nothing but head shakes. Okay, here we go. Spaced retrieval is a method designed to assist people to answer their own questions when they're information seeking and they just can't remember the answer. And it involves practicing remembering information over longer and longer time intervals, or where to get information. So what can people learn? They can learn all sorts of things. They can learn a room number, put the brakes on their wheelchair, when their family's going to come and visit, to remember to use a walker, to know when their next meal is, whatever kind of questions they might be asking you. Now, spaced retrieval doesn't work for anybody, but it is a good idea to anchor people to a system of finding information. And this system can be made to work for almost any circumstances. It can be that you give information on a whiteboard. Maybe you have one up on your kitchen wall, maybe not. maybe in a binder that you keep on a particular table or desk. Maybe you make a daily sheet every morning for somebody with the information they need. Maybe it's on a large calendar or a keychain recorder or a card in their pocket, on a cell phone if they're techie, a message in their purse or their wallet. There are lots of places. What we want to do is we want to help people know to always go to the same place. So the onus is on us to pick a system and then make sure the information that we want to share or they need is in the place we say it's going to be. And then we start quite literally training them to go to that place to look up information. When it comes to information, there's a couple of things to bear in mind. We don't want to necessarily give too much information, and we often don't want to give information too soon. For example, you go to the dentist. When I go to my dentist, they make an appointment for 6 months, hence when I'm supposed to go get my teeth cleaned again. If that appointment, if you take somebody who has dementia to the dentist and you make that 6-month appointment, I wouldn't be telling them about it until the day before. You don't want people anticipating and worrying into the future. So if you're going to go somewhere, or if you have a doctor's appointment, or if there's, when the bans are all lifted, somebody coming over to visit, you don't want to talk about that often too far in advance, because people with dementia often struggle with time and orientation to time. It can be very challenging for them to understand that. So you want to watch a little bit how much information you give and how soon you give it. So the whiteboards, the binders, those are for immediate information, those purposes. What we're going to do is I'm going to be quiet for a minute, believe it or not, and we're going to have a little audio clip of Dr. Cameron Camp, and he's going to talk about space retrieval, and then we can come back to this after. So Dr. Cameron Camp works out of the Myers Research Institute, Menora Park Center for Senior Living in the States. And what we're going to do is come into a radio program that he's on, and we've lifted a small clip from this radio show. So here we go.
And Alzheimer's disease. Hi, Dr. Camp.
How you doing, Jacqueline?
Great. Now, what approach would you use for an individual who repeats the same question over and over? That one, I get that question all the time.
That's a very good question. A number of surveys of caregivers, when they ask, what is the behavior that you find most stressful, this is often a number one, repetitive questioning. And a general technique that we use when we're trying to come up with an intervention for problematic behavior is to start by asking this question, why is this happening? And the answer cannot be because they have dementia. That's a nice circular argument. How do we know that they have dementia? Because this is happening. And why is this happening? Because they have dementia. So the thing to remember about a person with dementia is that they're a person. So we have to figure out, why would a person be asking the same question over and over again? What would cause us to do that? And there's usually two primary but very different underlying reasons for this. One reason is because the person may have difficulty storing new information. You have problems remembering new episodes of your life, recent information. And so under those circumstances, say a person wants to know when their daughter is going to come visit. They go up to a staff member at a facility and they say, when's my daughter coming to visit? And the staff member will say, she'll come tomorrow. But then it's like an eraser. Erases like the last 2 minutes or 5 minutes of your memory. But you still have that need to know when your daughter's coming. And so they may come back again after 5 minutes or so and ask the question again. So the underlying cause there might be information seeking. And the problem is that new information cannot be stored internally. It cannot be stored inside of internal memory.
Right.
If that's the underlying cause, then what we look at is a way to store the information externally and to teach the person a procedure to retrieve that information. So, for instance, there might be a card that says your daughter will be coming tomorrow, and you can keep the card in the person's purse. When the person asks, when is my daughter coming, the staff member can say, I think there's a message about that in your purse. Why don't you check it out and see? Mm-hmm. Have them open the purse, draw it out the card for themselves, and read.
Okay. So that's the general idea. You store the information somewhere. If you're in a house, you probably say, oh, let's go check the binder. Let's go check the book. Let's go check the whiteboard. You physically walk with, don't give them the answer. Walk with them over to the binder, the whiteboard, the wherever you've got this information. Say, let's have a look here. Sort of point at it, let them get the information. So every time they ask, you say, oh, I'm pretty sure that's written on the whiteboard, and you walk them to the whiteboard or the binder or whatever you're using. Eventually, you'll be able to say, I'm pretty sure that's on the whiteboard. Why don't you go check the whiteboard? And they can walk over for themselves and get that. And eventually, they will often just start going to the whiteboard on their own without even asking you. So that's the idea behind that, if you're storing external information. As we said, it works for some people, doesn't work for others. I think it's always worth a try. You never know till you try. So reason one is I can't retain the information in my head. Reason two, the second reason that people ask things over and over and over again, if they're not information seeking, they're probably looking for reassurance or attention or social contact. And just because two people are in a room together, if one person has dementia, they don't necessarily feel socially connected. They very often have to have an interaction to feel that connected piece. So those are the second reasons. So what you want to do is you want to think, wow, they're asking this stuff a lot. You want to see how often is it really being asked. And I know it sounds crazy, but if somebody's walking over to you and they're saying, what time is supper? And you say 5 p.m. and 5 minutes later, they're coming back and saying, what time is supper? And you say, supper's at 5. And the fourth time you say, I told you supper's at 5. It's might not be that supper's at 5 is the issue for them. It might be that they have some sort of unmet need and they need reassurance. So this is where we're going to try to think past the question itself and look at why that question might be asked. I remember when I worked in long-term care, for example, I had a lady who constantly asked about supper and usually started getting really stressed after about 4 in the afternoon. So when we start thinking, why? Because answering her when supper wasn't cutting it. It turns out she thought she was responsible for feeding all the people. And so she was getting very agitated because she didn't know she had enough time to make enough food to feed all these people. So it's worth thinking about asking why. Why do you want to know? I always start with, oh, supper's at 5. Are you hungry now? If somebody's continually asking me about supper, I'm always hungry. So the first thing I'm going to think of is, hey, is this person hungry? I would ask them. If they're saying, no, I'm not hungry, are they worried about missing supper? Are they worried that they might forget? So maybe they need some reassurance. You know what? Supper's at 5. I'm going to call you just before so you can wash your hands and come to the table on time. So don't give it a thought. I'll let you know when supper is. Maybe that was the reason behind their question. Because if they already know the answer, if you say, I told you supper's at 5, he says, yeah, I know supper's at 5, then there's more to it. And sometimes we have to be detectives and try to get to the more to it part. If it's unmet needs, if people are asking the question because they have some sort of concern or worry, it's not just information seeking, then we have to maybe change the way we are approaching the situation. The change needs to come with us and change our behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear another clip from Dr. Camp, and he's going to really talk about when it is not coming from a place of information seeking, but a place of feeling insecure within themselves. And then I have some examples for you afterwards.
Reason. Now, I was at a day center in New Orleans, actually, and staff came to me and said, we have a woman who's asking when her husband's going to come pick her up a lot. And I said, well, do me a favor. On a piece of paper, just put a little mark every time she asks that question today and tomorrow. And we'll see how often it actually happens. And sometimes just noting how frequently something happens lets you know that it's not constant and kind of bounds it and makes you at least feel like there's some control over it. Mm-hmm. So, it's a technique from behavior therapy that's sometimes used. Didn't work in this case because when they gave me the 2 sheets of paper when I came back a week later, there were 800 marks on each sheet of paper.
Gosh.
That's my personal record for an 8-hour shift for repetitive questioning.
My gosh.
And so this, you can imagine, staff were hiding in closets to get some time out. All right. And, they're at wit's end, and they're saying, we can't take care of this person.
Yeah.
So the first question, is why is this happening? They looked at me, I looked at them, and I said, here's something I want you to do. The next time she asks, when is my husband going to come pick me up? Look at her and say, well, when do you think? And they were just desperate enough to try it. Mm-hmm. And so they did. They said, when do you think? And she looks at them and says, 4:30, which was the answer she'd been hearing 800 times.
Oh, wow.
And then she waits 30 seconds and then says, so when is my husband going to come pick me up? That has a very different tone, a different flavor to it. And you can see there's probably a different underlying cause there. This is not information seeking.
Right.
And so that's a quick and dirty test in terms of why is this happening. If you say, when do you think, when they ask a question, and they look at you and say, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you.
Right.
They look at you like you're stupid.
Right.
Then they're probably information seeking.
Okay.
On the other hand, if they give you the answer, which they often will if it's not that, then you look for a different cause.
And it's probably a hug.
It's the usual 3 suspects, because then it's an example of a broader range of behavioral challenges in people with dementia that involves repetitive behaviors. It's a cousin to the woman who hits the call bell. And hits the call bell when people come in, and she says, and they ask her what's the matter. She'll say nothing's wrong. So there's usually 3 suspects in terms of what's driving that kind of behavior. Looking for reassurance, looking for some attention, and looking for social contact.
Right.
And so under those circumstances, then that's where behavior modification techniques, similar to what you're talking about in your book, are very useful. And so the way I explain it to caregivers is this. These people have a need, and it's an unmet need. They have a quota that has to be filled. They have so much attention that they need or reassurance that they need. In this woman's case in adult daycare, the question wasn't so much, when will my husband come, but will my husband come?
Right.
And when they would answer her question, they'd say, don't worry, honey, he's coming at 4:30. And so she's getting the reassurance they'll be there to pick her up. Okay. And so what I told them was, you have to fill that woman's quota. Right now, she's doing it on her time. She's controlling when she gets the attention, and it's not making you happy. And but this is the only way that it can happen. So you have to give her reassurance, or and for other people, the call bell, the social contact, the attention when they're not asking the question.
Right.
And that requires a conscious decision on the part of caregivers to do things differently.
Wow.
The squeaky wheel can get the grease, but it can squeak an awful lot.
Yeah. Well, that's with Dad, if he couldn't get attention with good behavior, he used bad behavior.
Exactly. They'll settle for negative attention.
Anything,
instead of no attention.
And I found it was so interesting once we started really just overboarding, rewarding the good behavior, we got a lot less of the bad.
That's it exactly.
Even with the onset of dementia.
Absolutely so. There's still lawfulness to the behavior. People still respond, to the same motivators.
Yeah.
And so the idea is if they ask the question, not to ignore them, but to say, when do you think? And if they say, like in her case, she'd say 4:30, and they say, that's right, now I have to help this person over here, but I'll see you in a little bit. And then they paid attention to the woman when she wasn't asking the question.
Right.
And within a week, it's dropped to 50 times a day, mostly in the late afternoon.
Wow.
Okay. So I know that you probably are not dealing with a situation where somebody is asking you 800 times in 2 days, but I think we remember stories. And so I want you to remember this story. And what I invite you to take away from the story is that two things happened. First of all, they did not ignore the question, gave it a reassured answer, and that they went out of their way knowing that in the short term, if they did a lot of TLC at other times, they could reduce the behavior. So I thought that story might stay with you. So emotionally based repetition, it's usually a need for reassurance. It's a need for validation. So I'm going to talk a tiny bit about validation and tell you a couple of stories. So I pointed out just a moment ago, ignoring doesn't usually work. It's really the meaning behind the words. So this is a story from my community experience. And I worked with a fella, and he used to work in Nova Scotia. For many years, he was based in Nova Scotia, and then he moved back to Ontario. And when he was in Nova Scotia, he became very, very dear friends with a pastor and the pastor's wife. And so after he came back to Ontario, he planned a trip back to Nova Scotia. Unfortunately, in the intervening time, the pastor had developed dementia. So my friend from Ontario was going back to Nova Scotia, and he was going to visit, and the pastor's wife was actually going to have a very small dinner in his honor and have a few people in, and my friend would go and have dinner. The pastor started asking over and over and over and over and over, who's coming, who's coming, who's coming, who's coming, who's coming. And the wife would tell him the name of the, 4 people that were coming, but it wasn't sticking. So she recognized that this wasn't information. This was more. There was something bothering him. And so the next time he said, who's coming? He said the name of the 4 people that were coming. And she said, you know what? You know them all. They've all been to the house. You get along great with all of them. I think you're going to have a wonderful time. And that was what he needed to hear. He was worried on the inside of himself. How will I manage? I recognize I have some deficits. How am I going to host? How's this going to go? So it wasn't about who's coming, their names. It was about who's coming, can I manage this situation? And as soon as she gave him that particularly reassuring answer, he actually stopped asking. Once he knew they were friends, it was going to be a comfortable situation, it just took his anxiety level down and stopped asking. So one of the things to often do is not to, when you're validating people, is not to agree or disagree with what they're saying, but to explore what they're saying. If somebody is asking you something over and over, see if you can find out more. You can give them a straight answer, but see if you can tease out of them why they want to know, or what you can do to help them with this. I would suggest that validation is really just meeting people where they're at, hearing without correcting, without disagreeing, and seeing if you can get them to tell you more. Because often you don't have to be a detective first class, but you have to be a listener first class. Because often the answer will come out if you get them talking a bit. So emotionally based repetition, how can we meet emotional needs? Sometimes it's with activity. Sometimes it has to be meaningful to the person. You can't just have everybody fold washcloths and then they're going to be happy. It doesn't work that way. But an activity that somebody is actually interested in doing will often diminish repetition. When they have something that they feel is interesting or important or useful to do, that really does help decrease emotional needs. And the other thing is, if you are going to try to distract somebody away from a topic that they come to again and again and again and again, you want to obviously answer their question, give them some reassurance. And then before you distract, think about, what am I going to do and where am I going to do it? Am I going to offer them a cup of tea? Does it mean we can move into the kitchen? Are we going to maybe go outside and do some yard work? Let's get in the front hall and get our coats on. Are we going to go for a walk? Whatever it is, because if there's a way to move somebody from where they are located to another location, another room in the house, or maybe going outside, or if you're outside coming in, whatever, often the distraction will last longer and work better for you. So think about that. When we're talking about meaningful activities, it does have to be meaningful to the person. And this is where some of those questions need to come back. The questions we asked at the very beginning about their new skill set, what can they handle, what do they like, what don't they like? Because to figure a meaningful activity for somebody, it has to be pertinent to the person. It has to be based on their current abilities. It has to be satisfying and enjoyable to them. Now, it can be active or passive. In other words, an active activity is maybe going outside and sweeping all the salt off the front walk. A passive activity might be listening to their favorite music. And the only way we really know is to have conversation with the person, figure out what they would like to do or not do. One of the people that are quite well, there's a couple, David Bell and Virginia Troxel. No, I'm sorry, I got that backward. It's David Troxel and Virginia Bell, that are well known in the field of dementia care, have written a lot of books called The Best Friends Approach. There's the Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, Best Friends Approach to activities, etc. And so they suggest, if you're thinking about activities, if you're trying to find meaningful activities for people, it's not the finished product. It is the journey versus the destination, so to speak. It's not in what's done, it's in the doing. You definitely want to individualize activities to tap into past interests and skills. The activities should be adult in nature. If they're not adult oriented, it probably won't work particularly well. Sometimes activities that recall a person's work-related past can be useful. And any activity that stimulates any or more than one sense is often useful. So if you're thinking about the best friends approach to activity, sometimes doing nothing is actually doing something. It is okay for people to sit and watch the dog walkers go by the front window. People don't always have to be busy in their activities, and that's something worth noting. Activities should also try to tap into somebody's remaining physical skills. If they're able to move, give them a job that involves them moving. Often you have to initiate the activity. You can't very often say to somebody with dementia, oh, just go and fill in the blank. They might need you to help organize or set up the activity. They should be voluntary. If somebody says no, and they really mean no, you don't want to push somebody. Intergenerational activities, always extremely positive. I've seen very great things come from that. And I know that we're going to work at the Alzheimer's Society at creating even more intergenerational opportunities for folks, because we know those things work so well. And the other thing is, sometimes we think we know best. And I have learned the hard way that ain't true. Sometimes activities you think will never work do work. So once again, give it a try. Okay, it didn't. but you might be surprised. You might really be surprised. So the best friends approach to activity. Think of personal care as an activity. That's bathing, dressing, grooming. Those can be activities. Often the activities need to be fairly short. Don't think in 2 and 3 hour stretches necessarily. Activities can be anywhere. They can be very spontaneous. They can be anywhere in the house. And activities may, depending on the person, of course, this is very personalized, they may fulfill religious and spiritual needs. It might be, if this was somebody's background, there might be a daily reading or a devotional that would mean something to them, or a prayer that you can say together that would mean something to them. So it really is individualized. I'm going to show you a little mini movie. It's only a couple of minutes long, and it looks at activities, and it might make it a little clearer.
When you're caring for a person with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia, it can be very time consuming. There's things to pick up at Costco, there's chores around the house, there's personal care. And so people say, I don't have time, David, for sometimes the engagement or fun. But let me remind you that a lot of things can happen in 30 seconds or less. Sometimes it just takes a minute or two to help the person feel safe, secure, and valued. Sometimes it just takes a minute or two to talk about their favorite memories or something really positive that can actually foster cooperation and turn a no into a yes. So let's talk about some 30-second activities. Perhaps you give someone a little hand massage. You ask them for a simple opinion. Mom, do you like this red sweater on me? Is it a good color? Or do you think I should wear a blue sweater? When you ask somebody their opinion, it helps them feel valued. A 30-second activity, sorting some items in a drawer, folding some towels, having some fun with the cat or the dog, and giving someone a little kiss, giving them a welcomed shoulder rub. These 30-second activities add up. And imagine you have a big family with 4 or 5 family members, and you just say, hey, everybody, don't forget, give grandmother those little 30-second activities throughout the day. Over time, that adds up to tens of minutes. It adds up to hours of affection, of connection, of again, helping that person feel in the swing of life. So yes, activities and socialization are in so many ways the treatment for dementia. I always like to say the brain loves company. I hope you'll have some robust activities, maybe go to the local museum, bake muffins together, take a walk, watch an old movie with Audrey Hepburn. But even when time is challenging, don't forget those little 30-second activities. There's so many things that can make a difference in a very profound way that will actually save you time in the end. Because if the person you're caring for is in a good space, is happy, everything goes better.
All right. I'm going to move on to one of the things that comes up often that needs reassurance, and I've tucked it in here, and this might be very repetitious for some of you. Hearing folks say, I want to go home, I want to go home. Think about, why is this happening? It's always the question you want to ask. Why is this happening? Try to look past the words to the feelings. When folks talk about home, there's a good chance they're not talking about bricks and mortar. Home really conjures a sense in your life when you were independent, where you had control and responsibility, you were important, maybe people looked up to you, you took care of things, you knew where you were and what you were doing, and you usually felt safe and secure. You know, there's that old saying that a man's home is his castle. The idea is that when you're home, you can relax, you can be yourself, you can feel comfortable. So when people are saying, I want to go home, I want to go home, you can offer reassurance, you can offer distraction. Those are short-term fixes, but usually people need more. They need some deeper, they need some validation. And so the long-term fix is usually making people try to feel a little more comfortable where they're at. Deep or long-term fixes are how we make people feel comfortable in the place where they're at. One of the ways that often gives people validation and makes them feel comfortable is not just reassuring them, but having them do something good for somebody else. That's often a very valuable tool. Could they help you? I know that you have to organize getting the cards and, addressing them, but maybe they could help send cards to people who are in hospital, who are ill, other people who are in isolation right now, and walk to the post box and mail those cards, make a real activity out of it. First, you have to choose the card. There's the opinion piece. Then you have to think of something to write in the card. There's the activity piece. Then you have to seal the envelope and put a stamp on, get organized to mail the card, or special occasion cards. You don't have to wait for a special occasion. That's the thing. They don't always conveniently happen when you need. That's why those caring cards are a thought. Or they could be the name tag boss. Now, when I wrote this a few weeks ago, we weren't in complete shutdown. We weren't all in a lockdown situation. So I want you to think of this for post-pandemic. One of the things that can be very useful for somebody is when you are starting to get back together with people, if they're struggling for who's who, maybe this summer there's going to be a bit of a family reunion, or maybe when the bans are lifted, there's going to be a birthday party, and people are coming over. Maybe the person could be in charge, have, hello, my name is tags. And as people come, oh, can I write you a tag? How do you spell your name? Or can you be in charge of handing them out? Make sure people wear them. Give that person with dementia the role and give them the chance to interact with people, to know who they are. These might seem bizarre to you, but they are remarkably useful. We tried the name tag thing 2 summers ago with our family member at a reunion, and it was immeasurably helpful and made them feel involved and made them feel secure about being in a group situation. I'm not suggesting 60, 80 people come over. We know that for people living with dementia, a smaller group is a good thing, but it's just something to think about. Needs of the people living with dementia. My goodness, aren't these the same as our needs? Exactly. Everybody needs to feel connected, respected, appreciated, loved, known, understood. When they experience belonging, you tend to have a reduction in repetitious questions. To share, to love, to give, to be productive, to feel hopeful, for sure. So focus on remaining abilities, emotional awareness, primary motor abilities, the ability to use their senses, their long-term memory. Music, for sure. Music resides in our brains longer than language. Very important and usually quite emotionally uplifting for people. And work with their sense of humor. Keep your own sense of humor if you can. What we want to do is focus on the remaining strengths and not what they can't do. We don't want to frustrate people by asking them to do something upon their abilities, but we do want to involve them. So in general, we know we're speaking to adults. We know that we need to give people more time to process. We need to slow down if we're going to be successful. And can we remember to invite and request versus commanding or ordering or bossing? If we can really be aware of our nonverbal communications, because our approach and our nonverbal will really indicate to somebody whether we're truly hearing them and there for them, or whether we're super impatient. We just want to move on. So you might have heard of the KISS. When I was growing up, my mother always told me it was for keep it simple, sweetheart. My mom's a very polite woman. But I want to introduce you to the Dementia Kiss, and it's ever so slightly different. There's an extra S in it because people living with dementia need a little extra TLC. Keep it simple, soft, and slow. That's how we want to communicate. The person can't help their behavior. It's caused by an organic brain disease. So we've got to change ourselves and change the environment. So I do have some resources here. I've listed the Best Friends approach, the Center for Applied Research, suggested there's a book on spaced retrieval. If you're interested, I just want to put a plug in for our programs. We are still here. It doesn't matter what is happening out there in the world as far as lockdowns go. The Alzheimer's Society is available. Please do not hesitate to be in touch. You can phone us, whatever symbol you use for phone. We are one phone call away. We do have social workers that can offer counseling to you. We have a wide variety of education sessions. We do offer iPods for people who need some support through music therapy. We have a wide variety of social and recreational programs and more coming on board all the time. So I cannot encourage you enough to participate. They're there for the taking. And the price is right for all of our services. We offer these at no charge. Finding Your Way, I'll talk about in a second. Our Minds in Motion classes involve not only physical exercise for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then half hour to 45 minutes of social stimulation and cognitive challenges. And that's a program that is designed for the person living with dementia and their care partner to come to together. And we offer that many, many days of the week, and you can come more than once a week. So if you're interested, please phone and check into that. We have all sorts of support groups that are available, so there's no reason not to check us out and find out what's going on, and I'll show you how in just a minute. I do want to talk a little bit more about finding your way. Unfortunately, people living with dementia do have a 6 out of 10 chance of having what they refer to as a missing incident or getting lost. And so there's a website called findingyourwayontario.ca, and that website tells you why people might get lost, suggestions for how you can reduce the risk. It has an ID package that you can print off and fill off against the day, heaven forbid, that somebody might get lost. It makes suggestions what to do if somebody goes missing, what to do when you're reuniting after an incident. And we're going to have a big talk on this. We're doing a special, and again, it's going to be on a Friday, Friday the 12th of February at 10 in the morning. So if you're interested, please be in touch with our offices and sign up. We're going to be doing a talk on learning about wandering, and we'll be referencing the Finding Your Way website and give you a lot of other information. The other thing of use on the Finding Your Way website is the home safety booklet, Living Safely in Your Community, and I would certainly recommend that you check that out. If for any reason you need the information and you don't have a printer, you need it in hard copy, please phone the office and we'll arrange to mail that out to you. We also have some other education programs that are not lecture style, but are interactive and in-depth. They're enhancing care programs. One is 4 weeks and one is 8 weeks. And we've partnered with Mount Sinai in Toronto. And these are programs where care partners can really focus on their own individual situation, brainstorm some solutions, maybe even practice those solutions, and connect with other care partners who are journeying with dementia. And so what I'm going to do when I send the evaluation out today is include a sheet on these programs and give you all the details and information about them. I know that if you've seen our talks before, you know that we are always looking to raise funds, as everybody is. We, unfortunately, in order to keep everything free for you folks, need to raise at least 60% of our annual budget. So if you are ever inclined to make a donation to the Society, we would certainly be appreciative. And if you make it to the Alzheimer's Society Waterloo Wellington, the double W, that will keep the funds local for our local programs and services. You can access us on the web. Oh, my web address disappeared. I I went to color it in, and what happened? It colored white. I'm sorry. Well, I will make sure to get the web address. It's certainly on my signature. So when you get our email later today with the evaluation and the care partner information, that will be there for you. What I wanted to draw your attention to was this symbol right here. This is the new symbol for YouTube, and we have a YouTube channel. And when you go on our website, our invisible website there, one of the things that you can do is look at our program guide. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to hold up our program guide. We'll go old school here. So there's our program guide, and it's updated all the time. It's updated regularly. In the center, we've introduced a new feature, and this is a 2-month calendar, and it lists all the different activities in education. So it's easy to pull out and put on your refrigerator and know what's happening at the Alzheimer's Society. I want to show one more thing, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Let's see if we can make this. Here it is. The other thing that I handed out, or I sent out with your invitation, your link, was a 1-sheet page on repetitive questions. So this is a little synopsis that might be an idea to help you.